Welcome to another edition of Community Matters. I'm Jim Cameron, still your host of this program, going on for 13 years now, and still the program director of Darien TV 79. And you, as a faithful viewer, would know, Community Matters is a show where we talk to folks in town who are involved with various community organizations, not necessarily town government, but all of those what they call NGOs, non-government organizations, nonprofits, etc., that make Darien such a special place to live. And no organization is probably as special and has as many roots in this town as the Boy Scouts do. We are joined today by two guests, Joellen Gray, who is a trustee of the trust. We'll talk about what the trust is in a second, and Rob Farley, who's a cub master of a couple of troops here in Darien. Welcome, both of you, to Community Matters.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks for having us.
Great to have you here. So let's talk a little bit about your professional background, how long you've lived in town, and then how you became involved with the Boy Scouts themselves. And Joellen, let's start with you.
Great. Well, I've lived in town since 1987. Professionally, I was director of marketing at a number of blue chip corporations like JP Morgan, Fujifilm, Xerox. And I also did a lot of volunteer work in town, primarily tied to children's education. I was involved in the after-school programs at the elementary schools and enrichment. I also ran the College for Kids program at Norwalk Community College for many years. I started in Boy Scouts, although we no longer call it Boy Scouts. We call it Darien Scouting. In 1993, when my oldest son became involved in scouting. And I have been involved ever since. I have 4 sons that we raised in Darien. They all went through the scouting program. They all became Eagle Scouts. And I saw the real value of a program that really follows a child from elementary school through high school, really focused on building their skills, their self-reliance, and their character.
And Rob, how did you become a cub master?
Yeah, so I moved to Darien in 2007 with my wife, coming out of New York City, like probably a lot of us. Originally, though, I grew up in Michigan, and we were in a scouting family. So my dad led the unit. Before him, my grandfather led the unit. So I always knew I would be around and involved in scouts. And when we moved to Darien, it was a few years before we had kids, but once my son got into elementary school, we walked over to the scout cabin and made sure that we got ourselves involved. At the time, we were always looking for new leaders. I think we're always looking for new volunteers and new help. But the Cubs pack that my son was involved with through Royal School needed some den leaders and needed a cub master. And so several of us stepped up and started getting involved. And it's been a blast the last few years, putting together the program, growing it with a lot of kids, getting people involved and kind of taking the feedback from the community and getting to know people like Joellen through the trust and some of the other units too.
Let's get a sense of how big scouting is in town. What kind of numbers are we talking about? And then we can talk about the rich history. How many scouts are there in Cub Scouts?
There are altogether about 300 youth involved in scouting, and that includes boys and girls, all the way from K through 12. At the Cub Scout level, which are the elementary kids, each of the units are aligned with their school. So they're going to Cub Scouts with their peers that they're in class with and with kids that they know. Once you're in 5th grade, you cross over into Scouts BSA, which is the traditional Boy Scouts of America. That is aligned with the middle school and the high school. And we've got 2 units at the boy group, Troop 53 and Troop 35. We've got a female unit, which is Troop 219. And then we have a STEM group, which starts at age 14, I believe. So that's also aligned with the middle school and high school. But altogether, about 300 kids, all aligned with the various schools.
And Joellen, how long has scouting been involved with this community?
Oh, Darien is really lucky because we have a very, very rich history with scouting. Scouting in the United States started in 1910, and scouting in Darien began literally in 1915. In fact, the kids used to actually camp on Contentment Island, which they called Treasure Island. And Boy Scouting continued to grow. And in about 1926, Andrew Shaw, who later became a first selectman, gave a gift of land and a cabin on West Avenue to support scouting. And we'll talk more about the trust in a little while, but that was the beginnings of the Andrew Shaw Memorial Trust. And then in 1928, Cub Scouts began. It's interesting because the National Association, Boy Scouts of America, literally did not officially create Cub Scouts until 1930. So Darien was ahead of creating Cub Scouts and seeing how that would work. That sort of history of innovation is actually an important part of who we are. Throughout our history, we have been an innovator. Many people in Darien probably don't know that EMS Post 53, our ambulance corps, actually began as a Boy Scout project and then just developed a life of its own. We actually also had a Sea Scouts program that helped with emergencies on the water. And we had an Explorer Post program that was a teen auxiliary support for the police during the 1970s and 1980s. Our innovation has extended even into this century, where in 2016, we created the very first in the country STEM venture crew. That was started by Pat Gentile, and he did an amazing job in building support there, where high school students who are interested in science, technology, engineering, or math would actually mentor elementary school students. And in the summers, they became counselors for kids in Norwalk through the Horizons program. And throughout the regular school year, they provided STEM education to the Cub Scouts. And then, of course, we embraced girls when the Boy Scouts of America said, hey, we're changing. We're no longer Boy Scouts, we're Scouts BSA. And in 2019, we started the first girls troop, which has just really grown and is thriving, which is great.
What is the relationship between the Darien Scouting Program and Scouts BSA?
So how it works everywhere in the country is that a local organization becomes a chartering sponsor of scouting, and they provide essentially meeting space and oversight. And then the organization pays dues to the Boy Scouts of America, and in exchange gets the curriculum, it gets leadership support, it gets training, it gets insurance, some insurance, not all of the insurance that's needed. But in general, there are really two kind of core elements that support scouting in every community.
Our guests today on Community Matters are Joellen Gray and Rob Farley, who come to us from the local Darien Scouting organizations. Rob, how much does it cost if my child is going to be a Cub Scout or a Boy Scout?
It's one of the most cost-effective programs, cost-efficient programs in town. When you join scouting, you're joining for a year, and really it aligns pretty closely with the school year, but there's summer activities too. So for the Cub level, when you're in elementary school, it's around $250 to join and participate for the entire year. It's not one season of sports or one camp. That's the entire year. When you move up into the scouting level, you go from doing around 1 or 2 meetings a week at the elementary school, or 1 or 2 meetings a month at the elementary level. When you're in the older scouts, you're 1 meeting a month or 1 meeting a week with another camp out every month. So it's a lot more active at the older levels. And because of that, the cost at the older level is about $450 for the year. But again, it's activities throughout the year. It is optional. So if you can't make it times, it's okay. If you've got a conflict with family or sports or other events, it can be flexible in that regard. But the cost itself, we never want it to be a hurdle. The trust that Joellen represents does offer funding if anyone needs it. But at the end of the day, it's a very cost-effective and cost-efficient program.
And where do I get the uniform for my child? How much does that cost? I mean, there's other costs beyond just the dues that you're paying, right?
There are, and there are some activities. You've got summer camp, which is typically a week-long program that you can opt into. And again, compared to a lot of other summer camp activities, it's a very cost-effective camp. The accessories, the uniforms, you can pick them up locally. Darien Sports Shop kind of has a room that has a lot of the scouting uniform pieces if you need something quickly or easily. But online, you can jump on scouting.org and they've got an online scout shop. Actually, I think it's scoutshop.org, and you can buy it all online. You're looking at a shirt, a neckerchief, pants, belt, a couple things like that. It's nothing that is too crazy. And we, on the Cub level at least, also have a swap shop. So as older Cubs move on scouts, they can hand their shirts in and reuse all the hats and neckerchiefs and things like that get pretty gently used. So you don't need to buy a lot of the stuff every single year if you wanted to use that swap shop too.
And Joellen, Rob was mentioning that there is financial aid for people that need it if they
Yes.
can't afford that.
Yes, we are 100% committed to making sure that anyone who wants to participate in scouting can, which means that if they can't, we will cover their registration fee, we'll cover summer camp costs. Sometimes we even cover high adventure costs. We just ask that the scout be an active scout and the parents make a small, maybe 10% contribution to that.
How does the level and engagement of scouting in Darien compare with other towns, New Canaan, Westport, Norwalk, Stamford?
Well, I've been told that within our district, the Poway district, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, that includes Stamford, Norwalk, New Canaan, and I think Wilton. We represent about 20% of all of the scouts enrolled. So we're considered pretty significant. We also provide the meeting space for the district council. They can meet either at the cabin or at our new location, Ferguson House on Old Kings Highway North.
Now, yeah, I'd add to it that the trust is very unique as a resource here in Darien. Most organizations, most units are chartered by a school or a VFW or a church, but you're constantly kind of making sure that you've got the chartering lined up and a meeting place lined up and support lined up. I came to Darien and got involved in scouting here, and it is 100% different here because of what we have with the trust. We've got the cabin, we've got the Ferguson House, we've got a dedicated board really committed to making the programs work. So it is very well supported and something that's really fun to be a part of.
And Joellen, sitting behind you on that wall, conspicuously placed for the benefit of our audience today, is a picture of the
Andrew Shaw Memorial Cabin. Yes, that is our facility on West Avenue.
And that's by the local artist, Nobu, right? So let's give her credit too.
Yes, and she did a fabulous job. It really communicates a lot of the fun and activity that happens at that cabin. That cabin is on the location of the original land that Andrew Shaw donated. It was built in 1998, but it was built essentially for one troop at the time. I mean, scouting has really grown significantly since the late 90s. And what happened is that over the last maybe 20 years, the other groups in town that chartered scouting units, like the churches and the PTOs and the VFW, essentially said that they didn't want to continue chartering these groups because of increased insurance liability. And so the trust said, okay, we'll do it. So now, as Rob said, we've got 8 different units that are actually meeting, and clearly the cabin was not enough space for that. So we looked at actually rebuilding the cabin, began a capital campaign, had some wonderful designs done, had done pretty successfully in our fundraising, and then COVID hit. And supply chain delays and higher construction costs began to make that program or project look unaffordable. So we ended up looking around for additional property to take some of the pressure off of the meeting space. And we found this amazing colonial building on Old Kings Highway North, next to the Congregational Church Nursery School, next, in fact, to the main heritage tree in town, a tree that has been certified for having been here during the American Revolution. So it's younger than we are, or I should say older than we are. And we purchased that. So we moved some of our activity into this building. We have Cub Scout Den meetings here. We have merit badge fairs here. We have rank interviews for achievement here. And in addition to that, we also do all of our administrative work and our fundraising out of this office. And I'm actually sitting in this office.
Well, all the more reason to have that picture hanging on the wall behind you as well, too.
Right, right.
You mentioned the trust. Talk to us about the trust. What is that?
So it's pretty unique. I don't know if there's any other community in the US that actually has a nonprofit charity solely dedicated to supporting scouting. And that was done really by Andrew Shaw with two other kind of semi-famous people in Darien, Edward Delafield and Henry Hoyt. They founded the trust in 1926. It has 3 trustees. It's myself, Todd Morgan, and John Delp. And we appoint our successors. About 20 years ago, we thought that we needed to have, and I was not one of the trustees at the time, the decision was made to actually have an operating board as well to help carry some of the burden of maintaining the property and oversight of the units. And so now there is a board that includes about 15 parents and alumni parents. And then all of the unit heads serve on that board ex officio. So it's a group of about 30 people who monitor the activities of scouting in town and also work to maintain the properties.
And the property where the Shaw cabin still sits, how large is that piece of land?
It's about, well, we purchased as part of our construction planning project, we purchased the house next door. So the combination is about 1.4 acres.
And is that because you're a nonprofit organization, is that tax exempt in town?
It is, and it's actually an important source of revenue for us. So as you can imagine, maintaining 2 properties and really subsidizing the units. Rob said the cost, for example, of a scout is $400. When you actually put in all the indirect costs, it's almost $700. So we pretty significantly subsidize each scout's activities. So we raise our money essentially to operate all of this activity by rentals. So for example, that house is rented. And also we used to have the giant tag sale, which everyone in town, I still get phone calls saying, are you doing the sale this year? That was an enormous effort. It took about 6 weeks of planning by parents and a lot of work by scouts and parents. And then everything we collected had to be sold in exactly 7 hours. And if it wasn't, then we brought in 15 charities and then we brought in the dumpsters. So it was a big effort. Not always a happy occurrence for the neighbors and certainly a lot of work. So during COVID, we had to transition from that. And very happily, we transitioned to online auctions. So we are doing those on a regular basis throughout the year. It's much less disruptive to the program, requires fewer volunteers, but still relies on the generous donations of Darien residents to give us their items. We get absolutely no money from the town or the National Boy Scouts. In fact, we pay them. So this program totally relies on Darien's generosity.
And how much money do you raise from the auctions as compared to what you used to get from the tag sale?
Well, it's kind of a apples to apples comparison is a little hard to make. Probably we raised or netted about $75,000 a year from that tag sale at its peak when it really grew to be so big. We do slightly better with the auctions, but again, it's a year-long activity. And if I can make a plug for the auctions, This is
By
an
all
example.
means, here we go.
This is an example of a very cool thing that we are going to be auctioning off. It was donated by a Darien resident. It's actually a sculpture by a well-known sculptor named Mark Mellon. It's called The Gymnast, and it was made for ABC Sports as a gift for their most important dignitaries. They had a limited edition of these, and it was to commemorate the Olympics in Los Angeles in 1984. So someone might be able to get that.
And that's we're recording this program in the early spring of 2023. That auction will be over when?
So this item will probably be in auction within the next 2 months. We have an auction. Check auctionninja.com. Look up Darien Scouts, and we run probably 2 auctions a month, filled with very cool things.
Cool things like that. But also in the old days of the tag sale, there used to be kayaks and bicycles and tents, and you're not auctioning off big stuff like that, I assume.
Oh, yes, we are. We have
really
our April auction will probably include, I think we've got 4 kayaks or boats to auction off. We have amazing furniture, original art. I would honestly say that since we've moved to auctions, the Darien community has given us almost better quality items than when we were promoting a tag sale.
And how do our viewers, if they have some heirloom or collectible or something they'd like to donate, how do they do that? How do they get that information to you and the item itself?
They just send an email to darienscouts@gmail.com, and we'll get in touch with them and make arrangements to either pick it up or have them drop it off.
Do they get a tax write-off?
And in fact, they do get a donation receipt.
Wonderful. Joellen Gray and Rob Farley are our 2 guests today on Community Matters. They are associated with scouting here in Darien. And so I just to briefly circle back to the Shaw cabin. Do I understand that you're not going to expand and build a new cabin as had been approved by P&Z?
We will not proceed with that particular plan. We do have all of our large group meetings still taking place at the cabin. It's still a very vital piece of the program. But how we improve that going forward, we're still thinking about.
Fair enough. Let's get back and talk about scouting, because we really need to talk more about what happens. Rob, if my son or daughter, are daughters allowed in the Cub Scouts?
They are, and it's relatively new and easy to misunderstand because there's a lot of confusion around it, even nationally. But nationally, there is an organization known as Boy Scouts of America, and there's another organization as Girl Scouts of America, and the 2 are not related. They're 2 separate programs, organizations, membership, and so on. Recently, 5 years ago-ish, Boy Scouts of America rebranded to Scouts BSA and started admitting females in as scouts. So there are females in Scouts BSA, which are separate from the Girl Scouts of America. So
but as early as Cub Scout level?
And as early as Cub Scout level. My daughter joined as soon as she could when she was in kindergarten. And she's in a unit that has several other girls that she's in class with. So it is active both at the Cub level and at the older levels.
But it's co-ed.
At the Cub level, everything is co-ed. They do split up by den, and they can do stuff by den, which is their grade individually, but it is done as a co-ed family unit. When you go into Scouts BSA in middle school and high school, you do get separated into separate units. So the females in Darien are in Troop 219, and the males within Darien are in 2 troops, Troop 35 and Troop 53. So it does become separate at the older ages.
So why would a girl want to be involved with BSA as opposed to the Girl Scouts?
There's a lot of fun to be had. The scouting program, the Scouts BSA program is very focused on leadership, outdoor skills, camping, independence. And there's a lot of things there that's attractive to a lot of people. It's the reason the Eagle Scout rank is so well recognized and so important around the U.S. and the world. So it's not that the two programs are competing necessarily. They're offering different things. But within the scouting program, I think my daughter, I think a lot of the other females in it are really focused on the outdoor skills, the camping and getting out with friends to do that sort of thing.
So what
I mean,
happens at a Cub? Go ahead, Joelle. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say one of the other advantages is that now Darien Scouting can actually be family oriented. So boys and girls in the same family can participate. And that's just easier for parents as well.
Mm-hmm. So let's say my son or daughter is a Cub Scout, and I think you said they meet once a month, or was it twice a month?
We tend to meet at the Cub Scout level. We try to get the whole pack together. The pack is the entire school. We try to get them together about once a month. And then as a den, which is just their grade, so it's a smaller group within the pack, they also meet about once a month. So give or take, adjusting for school breaks and holidays and things, we meet at the Cub level about twice a month here in the Darien units.
So what day, what time do they meet, and what happens at those meetings?
So I'm aligned with the Royal and Oxbridge schools. We meet mostly on Sundays, which is just a convenient time for a lot of our families because that's when you tend to have the least amount of conflicts with other after school activities and sports. The other units do have other days and times that they meet. Some of them meet on Thursday nights, I believe, and others meet on Tuesday nights. And then the older Scout units have more of a fixed schedule. So when you get into the Scout unit, you'll be either on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday night typically. But it all depends on the unit you want to participate in and your school. What they do, it varies every single meeting. And that's one of the great things about scouting is it's always about trying new things and experiencing new things that you might not otherwise do on your own. At the Cub level, we are shooting rockets. We build and launch rockets. We build and race Pinewood Derby cars. So you get a block of wood that's just a plain rectangle and you've got to shape it into the design that you choose. And then at the end of that building, you actually put it on a track and race all the other Cubs with each other. We do sporting days, and sporting days for us are not go out and play soccer or football, but it's coming up with games that are building teamwork and problem solving. And how do you get a rope to go into a square shape with your eyes closed? If everyone is holding a giant rope and you all close your eyes, can you communicate and make that into a shape of a square? Or other fun ones are just how do you move this ball from one spot to another spot as a group of 8 people, but none of you touching it with your hands and that sort of thing. So we kind of do game days that are problem solving. Another one we do is an election meeting. Right around the time of the election, we get the kids together and we have a bunch of candy and we have all the kids vote on their favorite candy bar. And it's a really fun time because they're going to get excited about candy where they might not get excited about a local politician, but you can teach them about voting. We have, you vote by den, and then you vote by sort of an electoral college method, and then you vote by a popular vote. So you can see kind of how the different methods of voting work and why they're used. And we have another one that's a representative where they'll vote for one of their peers to go up and vote on their behalf, sort of thing. So those are the fun type of different activities that we put together and they learn without realizing they're learning.
And what kind of supervision do they have in these meetings? What does the Cub Master, how many Cub Masters are there compared to how many Cubs and
So
are my kids safe, I guess is the question. My kid's going to be safe if they go into Cub Scouts or Scouting.
So that's two different questions, but I'll answer the safe one first. Is something that Scouts has gone out of their way to do is to create a safe environment. And there's reasons for it and how it developed, but they have what's called youth protection training. Every registered adult leader has to go through background checks and has to annually renew that youth protection training of how do you deal with bullying, how do you deal with abuse, how do you recognize abuse, and what do you do when you see those signs of it. So one of the key components of that is too deep leadership. Within Scouting, there are no examples of where an adult should be one-on-one with a child. Every time you're working with a child, it should be 2 adults in the room. And you'll see that at every level. It's the cub level and the adult level. And it's taken very seriously. So you'll see that in action. Together with all of that, I think it's made it a really safe environment and one that you can trust. And it going through the training, no one wants to talk about abuse. It's uncomfortable, especially when you're talking with other parents or with your own kids. But I used to see, before I was involved as a leader, examples like the church or USA Gymnastics or Scouts BSA, a few decades ago, that had these cases come up, and you wonder, why didn't anyone speak up? Why didn't anyone say anything? And it's because you haven't talked about it with your kid. And by talking about it with your kid, you can make them confident that nothing is their fault. If something does happen, they know who they can turn to. They know safe people they can approach. And that's one of the requirements, not just as a leader, but a parent with a child has to go through that youth training, the youth protection pamphlet, to talk about some of those issues and make sure they know that they've got some safe places to turn to if they ever have questions.
So the Boy Scouts of America has recently declared bankruptcy because they're facing, I think it was $2.5 billion in lawsuits and cases, because there were cases of sexual harassment of kids by Scout leaders. First of all, did anything like that ever happen in Darien? And B, if it didn't, what were the implications of those cases to scouting in Darien?
So in my 30 years experience in Darien, never heard of a single one of those cases. And I do think that, to the points that Rob made about youth protection training and the elements that are in place, the required elements in place to protect kids, that's been really important. In many ways, I think that other organizations can learn from that as well. Just to punctuate what Rob said, I mean, there are rules on too deep leadership that actually translate to no adult can actually drive a group of kids home, because there might just be, at the end of it, one child and one driver, right? A leader can't write an email to a child without copying another adult. I mean, there's always all of this protection. It's so ingrained in the way we think. So to that end, it's not surprising to me that in Darien, I haven't heard of any of these over the 30 years that I've been here. What does it mean, though, for our council and for us as an organization is another question. The settlement is being funded by the different councils. Our council has already made its payment. That was prorated on the number of cases that took place within the council geography. I understand that it was a relatively low number for this area of the country, which is quite good. And as far as the Andrew Shaw Memorial Trust, we have no financial obligations at all related to that situation.
Joellen Gray, Rob Farley, our guests today on Community Matters. They are involved with scouting here in Darien. Let's talk about something a little more cheerful and optimistic, and that is Eagle Scouts, of which Darien has many. Why would somebody want to pursue becoming an Eagle Scout, and what's involved with that?
So I'm going to let Rob talk because he is an Eagle Scout.
Bravo.
Yeah, the path to Eagle is something that's very well recognized part of scouting. And I'm in my mid 40s and I still put Eagle Scout on my resume. It's a big process. It's a big project and journey that you go through as a kid. I was in the car over the holidays and my wife was listening to a podcast with some local groups talking to some of the local kids here in Darien about pressures they face and competitive issues at school and things like that. And a lot of them, the environment around here is so competitive, and everything is about, making yourself better and competing with your peers and getting to the top. Eagle Scout's a way to learn and to do a lot of that stuff, but you don't have to have the competitive pressure. It's all fun. You go to these meetings, you're doing the tasks and the things you need to learn. It's learning about tying knots. It's building a fire. It's putting together a cooking and meal plan. Like I said earlier, there's just a lot of stuff in scouting that is experiencing new things and trying stuff that you might not otherwise do. It can be boating, it can be swimming, it can be archery. There's stuff around technical and using computers. There's a lot of stuff around citizenship. Ultimately, though, the path to Eagle is something you start, and there are several ranks you earn along the way, and each one gets progressively more involved. And then you start doing what's known as merit badges. And a merit badge is a very specific skill with a very specific topic. And I believe it's 22 merit badges that are required now to reach Eagle. And you'll earn those along the way with each rank, so that you're getting more and more as you go. There are about 14 of those 22 that are required topics, like first aid, camping, and some skills like that. And then there's another probably 80 to choose from that are totally elective, optional, and you can pick and choose which ones most interest you and ultimately get to that 22 that you need for Eagle Scout. So it's definitely self-driven. We provide a lot of resources, but all of scouting is youth-led, and they're teaching each other these skills as they go. So when you come in as a new scout, you're learning from older scouts. And as you become an older scout, you're the one teaching it and then to the newer scouts. So there is a lot of self-work there, and kind of self-motivation to get there. But as much as we can provide the guidance here among our units, it's been very successful for a lot of our youth.
At what age do you usually commit to taking that path, the Eagle Scout? And is there an upper age limit that you have to achieve it by or not make it by?
So in Cub Scouts, it's not a focus on Eagle. In Cub Scouts, you're just getting used to the program, and there are ranks and there are activities at every meeting you do. So every single time you go to a Cub Scout meeting, you're kind of earning a belt loop or earning a pin and earning a rank. But you don't need to do Cub Scouts in order to join Cub Scout, or in order to join Scouts BSA. You can, and it naturally progresses in. But the path to Eagle really starts when you join Scouts, which is in the 5th or 6th grade, depending on your age or whether you're involved in Cub Scouts. But later in 5th grade, you can join Scouts BSA. So around 10 or 11 years old, you're really kicking off the work towards doing that. The absolute earliest you can do it, if you hit everything, is around 14 years old. But you've got to complete it by the time you're 18. Most kids complete it anywhere 15, 16, 17 years old, but the deadline is to do it by your 18th birthday.
And one of the things you have to do to get an Eagle Scout is to do a community project. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's really a leadership project. You need to put together a project plan. You need to put together a team of volunteers. Sometimes there's fundraising involved, but ultimately then it's leading that project and completing that project. More often than not, they're going to be helping the community and doing projects around the community that better the area. And I know within Darien, a lot of those projects you'll see around town, you'll see little plaques that have been put up to recognize the work that different scouts have done here around Darien. It includes work within the land trusts and around town. And I know Joe Ellen can speak to a lot of the projects that have been done recently, or some of the projects that are underway. But the skills that you gain from that project, that position of being responsible from end to end to make something happen, is really one of the big parts about earning Eagle Scout.
One of the fun things about the Eagle Scouts projects is that very often you will see the Eagle Scout candidate coming before the Parks and Recreation Commission or the Board of Selectmen, asking permission and blessing to move forward with a project. And one of the projects, you mentioned that John Delp Sr. is one of the trustees of the trust. His son, many years ago, I think his Eagle Scout project was redoing the garden at the back of Town Hall. And I'm going to drop in a little video right here that we did of that particular project, so you can see the effect of Eagle Scouting on the quality of life in Darien. We are with Arthur Delp, who is a candidate for Eagle Scout here in Darien. What is it you're working on here, Arthur?
Well, I'm working on replanting an area right behind the Darien Town Hall at the DAC, the Darien Arts Center, and we're working to replant and remodel and redesign this area to make it aesthetically more appealing.
And this is your Eagle Scout project,
Yes,
right?
it is.
How did you choose this out of all the other things you could have done?
I was originally talked to Mrs. Deirdre Hogan, and she gave me this idea about this project, and I thought it was best to do about my Eagle project. So
Great. And you had to get approval from the town to be able to do this on
yes.
town land?
Yes, I did. I had to present to the Board of Selectmen and tell them about this to get approval.
And who's donating? I see some people donating their time and their labor, but there is also soil and plants and things. Where'd those come from?
We got the compost from the dump, and we got the most of the plants from Nielsen's Florist, as well as Gardener Center, and also we got many donations from the DAC board of board members. So
this area back here is pretty shady during much of the day. What kind of plants are you putting in?
we're putting in many shade-tolerant plants, and as well, we worked with Mike Cotta and his tree pruning service to bring a little bit more light into the area.
So, ladies, we're standing in front of the Darien Arts Center. Would you introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Lisa Terrain. I'm president of the Board of Directors of the Darien Arts Center.
I'm Amy Allen, the Executive Director of the Darien Arts Center.
And I'm Deirdre Hogan. I'm on the board of the Darien Arts Center and project coordinator for our new garden.
So how does the Arts Center fit in with this Eagle Scout project?
As the Arts Center's entrance is right here to the DAC Weatherstone studio, we wanted to enhance what we call our courtyard and welcome the community to all of our programs, as well as the back of Town Hall.
And I understand the back door to Town Hall is also going to be the new entrance for the handicapped seniors who are going to be using the new senior center. So how have you been involved aside from inspiring this idea? I see you look like you've been out there getting dirty today as well too, right?
The Arts Center has always had a lot of seniors here, and I think this is going to enhance their experience. It's a very creative garden. I think that the community has always loved the arts, and all use the town hall, so I think it's a win-win.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
So Arthur, after this project is done, is this the final piece of the puzzle to get you Eagle Scout status?
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah?
Yep.
Well, on behalf of the town and everybody that comes and uses this part of the town hall and access to the Darien Arts Center, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Joellen, that's an example of one project that was done by Arthur Delp in basically landscaping a piece of empty land behind Town Hall. Can you give us an example of some of the other Eagle Scout projects that we might see every day and not even realize it was an Eagle Scout?
Well, and that's exactly it. There's so many things around town that you may not be aware of. So, for example, the bike racks at the Darien train station and the Roten railroad station were an Eagle project. When you drive around town and see on the telephone poles a kind of yellow T, that's often an Eagle project. That we've done that a number of times. That yellow T is to identify fire hydrants in an emergency, especially if there's so much snowfall and they can't be seen. If you're looking down and you're looking at some of the sewer grates and you see a sign that says no dumping here, that was an Eagle project. At the schools, I think at Royal School, there are playground maps. Those were Eagle projects. Nests for Osprey, stands for those are Eagle projects. And really, almost anywhere you look, an Eagle Scout has probably touched it one way or another over the last 100 years.
I think one of the things on the website said that there were 40 different nonprofits in Darien whose work has been touched or improved by Eagle Scout project.
Yes, in fact, recently we've been helping a lot at the Mather Homestead, different projects that took place there as well. So we welcome participation with other nonprofits in town.
let's look back a couple of years and then look forward. How did scouting in Darien handle COVID, or how was it affected by COVID?
So COVID stunk as a community member. It stunk as running a community organization. The thing, though, that I think we did well, especially with some of the units themselves, or that worked out for some of the units, was our activities. Most of them are outdoors, and we can spread out. And it's not like we're chasing a ball and everyone's trying to go to one spot. We're able to spread out. We're able to wear masks. We're able to take a lot of the precautions that were necessary during COVID and still do a lot of our activities. So we continued to meet. My Cub group was continuing to meet, taking all of the precautions, meeting only outdoors. Sometimes it was in the rain, but still meeting. And we ended up having a lot of families join us over those 2 years, and we grew quite a bit, double digits, I think, over those 2 years, because a lot of the indoor after school activities or a lot of the indoor sporting programs couldn't meet because of all the restrictions. So and since then we've kept a lot of those families involved, and they've gone back to those other activities, but they've continued with scouting because they've realized how fun it is and the importance of it, and it doesn't necessarily compete with the rest of their schedules. So there were a lot of unique cases like that throughout COVID, where the scouts used creativity, but also being outdoors to continue with a lot of good activities.
Interesting.
And service is such a big, important component of scouting that during COVID, the troops all sort of stepped up. And one of the big projects we took on was making PPE for healthcare workers. And a lot of families made it at home, scouting families.
Personal protective equipment. We have to remember
Yes.
what these
Yes,
horrible
right.
acronyms that stunk so much, what they stood for. So they were making masks and things?
Yes, they made thousands of masks, and we got wonderful letters from Greenwich Hospital and other places thanking us for what we did.
Excellent. What's the future of scouting in Darien?
I think more vibrancy, more activity, growth. I think that the principles of scouting and its benefits, developing character, building self-reliance, they're really what kids need today. I think that the fun and the ability to sort of build friendships and fond memories is a value that parents have for their kids and kids really want. And I think we have an extraordinary collection of leaders right now. Rob is fabulous, and he's one example of the wonderful leaders we have who really care about kids. And importantly, it is an organization that is 100% based on volunteers, so that a lot of parents are involved as well. So there's this wonderful community that has grown up around scouting, and I think will continue to grow. But Rob, what do you think the future will be?
I think everyone's got this person in their group of friends that they refer to as the Eagle Scout or the Scout, because they're the ones that have learned how to try new things and solve problems when those problems come up. So the future of scouting is a lot of what scouting has already done. It's a way of teaching kids leadership skills and problem solving skills and self-reliance in ways that can be fun and will be useful for their entire lives. If someone is going through the scouting program and there's something they don't know, there's another scout there to teach them that. And I think that's something you pick up a lot on within this organization, that you can lean on your peers, you can lean on adult leaders, but really you can lean on your peers and you can help each other figure that out. And I think that's an important skill that they'll learn. Scouting is not a resume builder. I do still have it on my resume, but it's not meant to be a resume builder, other than the fact that it accomplishes just that. And something with the self-reliance aspect is that you're not, as a parent, you're not putting that pressure on your kid to do this. It's something that the kid is really wanting to do and accomplishing. So they get a lot of confidence from doing it too.
Excellent.
And there's one other element I think is important. this is not a program where anyone is ever cut. And so it really is something that you do at your own pace, and you have to enjoy it as part of the community. But it pays off in benefits that are kind of fun and subtle. So for example, if you're a scout and you're graduating from middle school to high school can be a little bit frightening when you first go and you're walking those halls. But all of a sudden you see other scouts who are in your troop, and they give you a smile or a nod, and you know that you belong. And that sense of community is just really important for kids today. And one of the many, many benefits of scouting.
Do kids still wear their scouting uniforms or Cub Scout uniforms to school?
No. And I think they hate them, but that's happened for 100 years.
Yeah,
Oh, when I was a scout, we was to wear ours, but that
Did
was
you
long
like it?
ago
I
in
know.
another country.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and there was the Scout Day where you'd wear your uniform to school. We have not done that. There are units that still do. I don't think any of the Darien ones do, but one of the big goals of that is recruiting and making sure everyone sees your friends all see you. We don't want to pressure kids into trying to recruit their friends. They want to talk to their friends about it, but we don't need to have them do things they're uncomfortable in order to accomplish it. So I like to say that in order to recruit new kids, we put together a good program, and the word of mouth gets around. So I think that happens. And but having the uniforms at school is not one we've had to try.
Well, I hope we've contributed to the word of mouth efforts through this interview today. Stay tuned. In the credits, I'll put all the information you need to get in touch with the scouting activities here in town, the auction, how to contribute your gently used heirlooms to help raise more funds for scouting as well too. I want to thank our two guests today, Joellen Gray, who is a trustee, and Rob Farley, who is a Cub Master from the scouting program in Darien. Thank you very much for being with us on Community Matters.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you, our ever faithful viewers, for watching yet another edition of Community Matters.